Dzień dobry. Witam serdecznie w Zielonej Rozmowie Małgorzaty Tracz. Wspólnie z moimi gośćmi rozmawiam o polityce, bieżących wydarzeniach i zielonych postulatach. Zapraszam do słuchania. Dzień dobry Państwu. Witam serdecznie w kolejnej Zielonej Rozmowie. Dzisiaj będziemy mówić o fast fashion. I mam też szczególnego gościa. Tym gościem jest Rasmus Nordqvist, który jest byłym posłem duńskiego parlamentu, jest też moim kolegą z Zarządu Europejskiej Partii Zielonych i mam nadzieję, że przyszłym europosłem. It's nice to having you here, Rasmus, in Poland to support my campaign and also to talk about very important topic, which the fast fashion is.
Well, pleasure to be here and be here fighting with you for this very important campaign, not just for Poland, but for Europe. And yes, fast fashion is very important. It's actually the reason I joined politics was to change what we're seeing.
So you're the expert on the topic. Could you tell our listeners what this concept is all about?
Well, first of all, I have to say that fashion can be fantastic. I mean, it's about dressing, and fashion is also communication. How do we communicate without words when we cross each other in the street? But fast fashion is when you produce a lot of cheap clothes, very often. I can say when I left college, design college, back in 1999, normal companies were doing 2 or 4 new seasons a year. But now we see fast fashion shops and chains, they're coming out with new clothes for you to buy every week, year round. So they're pushing for a consumption which is very fast, very cheap. You buy something and then it doesn't last fashion, but also the quality is so poor, so you throw it out after very few wears.
So let's go a bit more deeper into the topic. The problems facing the fashion industry burst into the public consciousness largely as a result of a tragedy that occurred in Bangladesh in 2013. At the time, a building house or a sewing factory that made clothes for some of the world's biggest fashion brands collapsed. More than 1,000 people died and 2,500 were injured in the disaster. How has this tragedy affected the fashion industry?
Well, to be honest, it hasn't a lot. I mean, just when this tragedy occurred, we saw many companies going and say, we want to change this and we want good conditions for the workers and so forth. But we haven't really seen any change because the whole nature of fast fashion is to produce as cheap as possible. So you produce far away from the consumer. It was Bangladesh, but I mean, every time one country get a bit better in workers' rights, in environmental protection, of course it gets more expensive to produce. So the companies, what do? They just change their production to a new country where they can push workers' rights, where they don't have any environmental protection. So we haven't really seen a change, and that's a tragedy of it.
It's so upsetting. The drive to reduce production costs as much as possible is not only linked to labor rights violations, but also has a negative impact on the environment. Could you tell us a little more about the environmental impact of the fashion industry and also about the true cost of production, for what we actually pay?
No, that's true, because I mean, as I said before, you always move the production to the cheaper country where there's no control on the environmental impact of production. First of all, we have a lot of chemicals being used in producing tanning, I mean, t-shirts, for example. We use a lot of water. I mean, a t-shirt in cotton, I mean, the amount of water, and this should go to drinking water, to crops you can eat instead, is being used on producing these things. And then you have the CO2 emissions from the fashion industry. I mean, fashion is among the highest industry in CO2 emissions we see overall. I mean, even compared to airplanes, shipping, fashion is there pushing it to the top. So it's a very, very high cost. But you don't feel that when you go down to one of the fast fashion chains. I don't know, I mean, what you're using here in Poland specifically, but H&M, Primark, so forth, and you can buy a t-shirt for what? For 5, 6, 7 euros. I mean, it has nothing to do with the actual cost on on the world, on Earth. Also, you see the plastic coming from fashion industry. I mean, almost a fifth of the plastic pollution in the oceans comes directly from the production of fast fashion and aware of it. Because every time you wash something, small microplastic being washed out and so forth. So it's the actual cost of the fashion industry we see today is gigantic.
So we already know what the negative consequences of the fast fashion are for humans, for nature. How does it work? But it is worth considering how to counteract them. What legal solutions should be introduced at European and national level?
Well, luckily we're seeing in the last few years that something is being done on European level. I can be a bit concerned that it's not enough that's actually being done, because the big problem is too much is produced, too much is consumed. So we need, first of all, to use less and use better. I mean, when you know that, for example, the fibers that make up the thread that's being knitted or woven into cloth that's sewn into clothes, I mean, the fibers is some of the worst when it comes to CO2 emissions. So we need to produce a lot less. What's needed is, first of all, that the producer is responsible for what they're producing from beginning to end. That means even if you're buying it, the producer is still responsible for it when you're throwing it out. So we see more recycling. Right now, I think it's, as far as I remember, it's around 1% of clothes actually being recycled globally. I mean, 1% of the masses that's being produced. I also think that if you do this producer responsibility on the garment, we can hopefully see that prices are going a bit up, because actually clothes are too cheap today. We're seeing many people buying things, using them once or twice, and they're lying in your closet for 1-2 years and then being thrown out. So we need to consume better, and the legislation being done from the European Union should emphasize this, that you're responsible for what you produce, you're responsible for the harm you're doing to Earth, and you're responsible for it from beginning to end, not just until you sell it to the consumer.
Let's hope that after next year's election to the European Parliament, there will be even more people who want to address the climate crisis and who will also take it upon themselves to introduce appropriate regulations for the fashion industry. And I hope you will be one of them. Fingers crossed for it. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask you to tell us how ordinary consumers can reduce the negative environmental impact of their clothing purchases.
Well, first of all, be aware. I mean, we see so many companies now saying they're sustainably produced, and there's a lot of greenwashing going on. I mean, a lot of greenwashing. And I'm a bit sad to say the first thing you can do as normal citizen, as consumer, is consume less. I mean, it is the most important step. Consume less. I mean, buy better. When something is if you have a hole in your trousers, I mean, learn how to mend it, or go down to local tailor and get help to do it, or to your grandmother. I mean, so repair what you have, and even change it. I mean, you see more and more young designers also who wants to take an old jacket and make it more fashionable again. Again, it's a way of prolonging the life instead of going out, buying new, throw out the old. So really, it's also a support of young designers, of local craftsmen who can help you do these things. And then, of course, if you buy, also buy recycled. I mean, recycling your things, share with your friends. I mean, you see in Denmark, where I'm from, you see more and more people doing these swap parties where people come together with the clothes they're not happy about anymore. I mean, it's not they're destroyed, it's not they're out of fashion really. They just just don't wear them. So they meet up and they change things, and it's like getting new. I mean, because new is not about going down by it. It's also about, I mean, what a wonderful shirt. I mean, maybe, you get tired of it and I would look fantastic in it. So that's also a way of doing it. But first of all, consume less, buy better quality, and repair, prolong life, redesign, do all the things actually we used to do not many years ago.
Rasmus, thank you very much for talking to us and sharing your knowledge for the fashion industry and the fast fashion problem with our listeners. I think it's a very interesting podcast, and many things you said actually were also inspiring for me.
Well, thank you, and a pleasure to be here. You know, I can talk about this for hours, so I'm happy to share what I know. And also, again, I have to say, as I said in the beginning, I love fashion. I love to dress up. I love what it can do. But we should just think about people producing it and think about our climate and our environment as well. So thank you, and best of luck in the election. We need you in the Polish Parliament.
Pięknie dziękuję Państwu za wysłuchanie dzisiejszej zielonej rozmowy, też troszkę niezwykłej, bo po angielsku i na temat, którym do tej pory się nie zajmowałam, ale myślę, musimy się tym tematem zająć. Będziemy teraz mieć troszkę przerwy w nagrywaniu podcastu, dlatego że mamy ostatnie dni kampanii wyborczej i dla mnie jako kandydatki, która też się chce wieloma rzeczami w przyszłym parlamencie zajmować, ważny jest teraz kontakt bezpośredni z ludźmi na ulicach Wrocławia i miast dookoła Wrocławia, więc więcej czasu będę z Państwem właśnie w moim okręgu rozmawiać niż nagrywać rozmów w studio. Natomiast bardzo zachęcam, by 15 października zaufać mi i oddać głos właśnie na mnie na listach Koalicji Obywatelskiej. Startuję z numerem 2 i mam nadzieję, że będę mogła jeszcze dużo dobrego zrobić w przyszłej kadencji parlamentu. Do usłyszenia pod koniec października. Materiał sfinansowany ze środków Koalicyjnego Komitetu Wyborczego Koalicja Obywatelska, Platforma Obywatelska, Nowoczesna, Inicjatywa Polska, Zieloni.